Long before European ships appeared on West African waters, there was a kingdom in the forest of what is now southern Nigeria that ruled through order, tradition, and power. This was the Kingdom of Benin. By at least the 12th century, Benin had developed into one of Africa's most sophisticated states. It was not a loose collection of villages. It was a centralized empire governed by law, ritual, and hierarchy. At its center stood the Oba, not merely a king, but a sacred ruler believed to exist between the human and spiritual worlds. His authority was absolute but not chaotic. The Oba ruled through councils, guilds, priests, and palace officials. Every role in Benin society had structure. Every ceremony had meaning. Benin City itself shocked early European visitors. By the 15th and 16th centuries, Portuguese and later Dutch traders described a city of wide streets, massive earth walls, and an enormous royal palace complex that stretched for miles. Some accounts compared its organization to European capitals of the same era. But Benin's greatest legacy was not its walls. It was its memory. Instead of books, Benin recorded its history in bronze and ivory. Royal artisans, working in tightly controlled guilds, used a lost wax casting technique to create detailed plaques and sculptures. These works documented coronations, wars, rituals, victories, and lineages of kings. Each bronze was a page of history. Each carving was a record of power. Nothing was accidental. By the 18th and 19th centuries, Benin controlled regional trade routes, regulated commerce, and limited European access to its interior. This independence frustrated European powers, especially as industrial demand for palm oil increased. Benin was rich. Benin was organized, and Benin refused to be controlled. By the late 1800s, that refusal would place it directly in the path of the British Empire. The first Europeans did not arrive in Benin as conquerors. They arrived as guests. In the late 15th century, Portuguese ships appeared along the West African coast. Unlike many regions, Benin did not panic. It did not collapse. It negotiated. Trade began: pepper, ivory cloth, and later palm oil. European traders were allowed access only under strict conditions. Benin dictated the terms. The Oba controlled who entered, where they went, and what could be traded. Foreigners were never allowed full access to the kingdom's interior. For centuries, this balance held. European traders came and went. Benin remained sovereign. But by the 19th century, the world had changed. Europe was industrializing. Factories demanded raw materials, especially palm oil, used for machines, soap, and candles. Britain, now the dominant global empire, wanted more access, more control, more profit. Benin refused. The Oba restricted trade routes. He enforced royal monopolies. British merchants complained bitterly. To them, Benin was no longer a trading partner. It was an obstacle. British officials began describing Benin as hostile and uncivilized. These words were not descriptions. They were preparations. By the 1890s, British colonial administrators were actively seeking an excuse to intervene. They wanted Benin opened by force. They wanted its independence ended. In January 1897, a British delegation led by acting Consul General James Robert Phillips attempted to enter Benin City without permission during a sacred period when outsiders were forbidden. Benin officials warned them to turn back. They did not. The delegation was ambushed outside the city. Several British officials were killed. Within weeks, Britain had its justification. The decision was made in London. Benin would be punished. In February 1897, the British Empire acted. What followed was officially called a punitive expedition. In reality, it was a full-scale military invasion. A British force of roughly 1,200 troops, including Marines, soldiers, and African carriers, advanced toward Benin City. They were armed with modern rifles, Maxim machine guns, and artillery, weapons the Kingdom of Benin had never faced before. The outcome was never in doubt. As the expedition moved inland, villages were burned. Resistance was crushed. By the time British forces reached Benin City, the heart of the kingdom stood defenseless against industrial firepower. The city was taken. The royal palace, the spiritual and political center of Benin, was set ablaze. Its courtyards were reduced to ash. Sacred spaces were violated. Centuries of history were exposed, not understanding, but to plunder. The Oba, Ovenramwa Nagbesai, did not flee immediately. He eventually surrendered, believing cooperation might spare his people further destruction. He was wrong. Benin City was effectively destroyed. The kingdom that had stood for centuries was broken in days. But the invasion was not over, because what the British wanted most was still inside the ruins. After the fires died down, the silence revealed what the invasion was truly about. Inside the ruins of the royal palace, British officers found something they did not expect. Thousands of bronze and ivory objects, arranged not as decoration but as records. Bronze plaques lined palace pillars. Sculpted heads honored past kings. Ivory carvings marked ceremonies, rituals, and royal authority. These were not random artworks. They were archives, a visual history of an African civilization, and they were immediately claimed as spoils of war. British soldiers and officers systematically removed them. Crates were filled with bronzes, ivories, core regalia, and sacred objects. Nothing was cataloged for preservation. Nothing was protected for return. By the end of 1897, thousands of Benin artifacts had been shipped out of Africa. Some were sent directly to Britain. Others were sold across Europe to pay for the cost of the expedition itself. Museums in London, Berlin, Hamburg, Vienna, and Leiden acquired them. Private collectors followed. In Europe, the reaction was shock, but not outrage. How? People asked, could Africans have created such advanced metalwork? Some scholars refused to believe it was African at all. Early theories falsely credited Europeans or ancient Mediterranean civilizations. The truth was uncomfortable. Africa had produced master artisans long before colonization. The Benin Bronzes shattered the myth of African primitiveness. So the story was changed. They were rebranded as art, stripped of their context, and placed behind glass, admired, but disconnected from the people who created them. And Benin was left without its memory. When the Benin Bronzes arrived in Europe, they created a problem. They were too advanced, too detailed, too sophisticated. Museums proudly displayed them, but scholars struggled to explain them. The dominant belief of the time insisted Africa had no complex civilizations before Europe arrived. So the truth was bent. Some claimed the bronzes were influenced by the Portuguese. Others argued they were created by a lost non-African race. A few even suggested ancient Egypt or mythical outsiders. Anything except African genius. The bronzes were removed from history and placed into art galleries, stripped of their meaning. Labels focused on aesthetics, not origins. No mention of invasion. No mention of theft. No mention of Benin's kings, rituals, or political system. Meanwhile, in Benin itself, the palace was gone. The monarchy weakened. Sacred traditions were disrupted. Generations grew up without the physical symbols that once told their story. A civilization was not just conquered, it was edited. By the early 20th century, the Benin Bronzes had become some of the most prized African objects in Western museums. They were studied, admired, replicated, but never returned, and the silence around how they were acquired became normal. Benin did not disappear. It endured. The monarchy survived in a reduced form. Traditions continued, orally, quietly, without the objects that once anchored them. Craftsmen passed skills from father to son, even when the royal workshops were gone. But something was missing. The bronzes were more than symbols. They were teachers. They recorded kings' ceremonies, victories, and laws. Without them, history relied on memory alone. Colonial rule reshaped daily life. New borders, new laws, new authorities. The story of Benin was no longer told by Benin, and for decades, no one asked about the bronzes. As African nations gained independence, old questions resurfaced. Nigeria began asking about its stolen past. Scholars challenged museum narratives. Historians exposed the 1897 invasion for what it was: not diplomacy, not justice, but punishment and plunder. Requests were made, then demands. Museums resisted. They argued legality, preservation, ownership. They claimed the bronzes were safer in Europe, as if Africa had never protected them for centuries before. The debate grew louder, but returns were rare. Still, the silence had been broken. Over 120 years after they were taken, the impossible began to happen. Museums acknowledged the truth. Germany announced returns. Universities followed. Private collections released pieces. The British Museum, holding the largest collection, remained resistant, but pressure intensified. In Nigeria, plans were made. Museums prepared. The descendants of the Benin Kingdom waited. When the first bronzes returned, they did not arrive as trophies. They arrived as survivors. But many were still missing. The Benin bronzes are not just artifacts. They are proof that Africa recorded its history, proof that African civilizations ruled, governed, and remembered, proof that what was stolen can still speak. And the story is not over, because history doesn't belong to museums. It belongs to the people who lived it.